I will have to be the sort of stiffy one here on the side because we're trying to make sure that time is kept as well as we can. So it is my great pleasure to introduce the next panel. It's on Bitcoin, blockchain, buzz, economic and financial outlook. And here to chair it is Roseanne Lake, a correspondent at The Economist. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Good morning. It's wonderful to be here in Iceland. I spend a lot of my time in the Caribbean and in Cuba, so the weather is certainly an adjustment. You may be wondering why someone who spends a lot of time in possibly one of the most cash-dependent and possibly financially backward societies in the world is moderating a panel about cryptocurrency, Bitcoin, and the digital economy. Part of the reason for that may be because before Cuba, I spent 5 years in China. Which is probably leading the financial disruptions and the entire world of financial technology. And I have to say, it was invigorating to spend 5 years living in a country with the largest population of women in the world, 650 million of them, that's quite the superlative, and home to the highest percentage per capita of self-made female billionaires. And it really just was fantastic to be in a culture where women were in society and they were working and they were inheriting money and they were making money. And you could sense that that financial inclusion was in a very good place. And a lot of times I would ask my Chinese colleagues, what is it about you guys that you're just good at this? And their answer was, 我们不怕赚钱. We're not scared to make money. You women in the West, you're scared to make money. And I said, no, I'm not scared. I'm just a journalist. So, you know, that's the problem. But anyway, today we have an excellent panel that is in the process of getting mic'd. We've got a composition of 3 people, so an investor, major executive at a massive credit card company, and a head of state who are just as committed as I am to financial inclusion and to discussing the ways technology and all sorts of digital disruptions can help promote that in the developing world and the developed world that China straddled in such an important way and that we're going to talk about in many other regions of the world. So I'd like to, what, are we on the way? Okay, so we've got Anne Cairns from MasterCard. Who's up next? We have Her Excellency Marie-Louise Colero-Preca, the President of Malta. Thank you. And Kevin Liu, a partner and chairman and a member of the Global Executive Board at the Partners Group. So, welcome to the 3 of you. Since I started talking a little bit about China, I'm wondering if we can go there first. And then look at the developing world and what's happening in Africa and all of the other things that we were discussing in the green room. So, Anne, I know you travel a great deal. Could we get you to talk first about what you've seen in Asia? You had a recent trip to China. Your beautiful jacket is a testament to your trip there. Very auspicious red to start us off this morning. Can you tell us about what you're seeing and where this is headed?
So I think you're quite right. What we're seeing is the rise of women around the world, and we're seeing it very much in Asia and Southeast Asia. I actually was in Vietnam a couple of years ago, and they asked me to come and speak at the Women's Union, and I thought it would be, you know, a handful of people. It was a room this size of leaders, and I said, how many women are in the Women's Union? And they said, 15 million. And I thought, this is fantastic because these women are sharing what they need to do to be successful in the whole commerce space. But I think to your point about inclusion, I think technology has a huge role to play to actually bring women into the financial system, because in many cases, as we know, the people who are excluded are women, and having a mobile phone, being able to open a bank account, being able to pay and receive payment, start to become really important, whether you're a micro entrepreneur or you're running a great big global business. And if you're running a great big global business, and I hear that 75% of the world's wealth is going to transfer into women's hands in the next 20 years, then maybe we're in a world where we'll see so much more impact investment.
Mm-hmm. And Kevin, you manage about $80 billion worth of investments. Where do you see investments going? You invest in a lot of traditional industries. How are they being disrupted by technology, and where do women figure into that?
Great. Yeah. Maybe as a quick introduction, I run the Asia business for a Swiss private equity firm called Partners Group. As I mentioned, we manage about $80 billion of capital on behalf of 1,000 plus institutional investors. These are the pensions, insurance companies. I'm sure some of you with capital is managed by us one way or the other. So I think you have two questions the way I interpret. One is technology, right? The other is women. I think I'm partially already mentioned as an investor. Technology is a very important part of our investment strategy. Even when we make those more traditional investments in manufacturing, education, services. So the way my company does a factor in technology is that in the value creation process, when we buy a company, try to make a company better, right? Obviously, technology, digitalization, and other things are a very big part of that. We have a special team in the company that's just focused on that for all the companies we buy and control. Second point is when we look for companies to buy, we always bear in mind what could be the disruption. If there is a disruption in that sector, how would this company fare, right? Which is why we frequently focus on what we call category leaders. So these are the companies that are in their global original 1, 2, 3 position. If there's a disruption, because in today's investment world, you cannot assume your business model, whatever you have, is going to last for the next 10, 15 years. But if you want to hold them in a private equity company, you have to be able to respond to disruption in the most favorable way, right? Maybe on the second part, women, let me answer it a little bit more broadly. What we see is that our investor base, obviously a lot what we do is to generate return for our investors. And therefore, what our investors look for, whether it's financial return or societal return, is hugely important, right? So what we see is, as Anne already mentioned, we see this trend of wealth increasingly going to women, which is a good thing. They look for slightly different angles. We also see millennials, the young people, when they look for investment options, they have slightly different perspectives, right? So, which is why partially the reason we were very excited that this year in April, we launched our new SDG fund, which is a $1 billion vehicle that only supports companies or assets that we can directly attribute to one or more of the UN SDGs. A big part of the reason is not only we think there are investment opportunities, not only we think they make perfect sense, but also because our investors, women, millennial investors, and other investors who are more socially minded actually demand a solution, right? They want due return. They don't want to sacrifice return, but they also want a good thing. So I think it's a very interesting base for us as an investor.
A big part of these solutions is technology, right? None of this happens without technology. That's what's enabled all of this. Her Excellency, Malta has done a fair amount as far as it comes to regulating financial transactions. Can you tell us more about that and what that's done to sort of to further this?
Yeah. I think that we are at a very unique point in time in the world. We have a unique opportunity to, through technology, to really give the possibility for access to wealth and prosperity, not just to the global companies, but also to that woman wherever, in Africa, in Asia, in Europe, because we do have women. Let's not think that there aren't any vulnerable women that need to have access to technology or to any other facility that can give the opportunity to stand up and have the dignity of having a job opportunity. So what we have been seeing in Malta is, first of all, it is very important to have a proactive government, to take on board immediately, not to stare at things, but to analyze immediately, assess, and really have a future and a vision for the new things on the horizon. And technology is definitely the in thing for our progress. However, we believe in regulation and education. it is not something which we can take for granted. Let's not think that bringing in blockchain technology and any disruptive technology on board will solve the problem of vulnerable people, of women who have not the facilities to move forward. We need to have education, because if we do not have education as a fundamental part of the whole vision, we will create a new divide, a new poor class. So education is part and parcel to this. And this is what is happening in Malta. First of all, the government have legislated. We have a very comprehensive legislation together with regulation to regulate the business of technology, of blockchain in this regard. Because blockchain till now, for example, is not perceived by everyone as being the technology that really can take us forward. Some are thinking that this could be a cover-up of some sort of new type of money laundering. So we wanted to ensure that legislation is in place and the regulation is in place, so that really and truly we will get those companies who are serious and responsible. Because we don't want to do anything to have anything to do with companies who are there for the immediate and not for tomorrow. We want sustainability on this. So probably we are the very first country across the globe that have legislated so comprehensively. But the legislation is not there only to safeguard the business for the business people, but also to safeguard consumers. We must not forget the consumers. When we are legislating and thinking of how to attract businesses and the responsible and sustainable businesses, we need also to give peace of mind to our peoples, to the consumer. So that legislation, the comprehensive legislation that we have, is intended also to protect the consumers. But in parallel to all this, we are pushing forward for education. So what we already have in place, courses within our university, within our vocational education, to ensure that our young people can keep up. And not only to keep up, but also to have the proper human capital, which is educated enough, with the skills, empowered with the skills, so that these businesses can thrive. Otherwise, if you do not have the people who are the employees that can take up such business, or rather be absorbed in such businesses, if you do not have the skills, you cannot attract the businesses to come over. So this is a whole, we have to look at technology in a whole, in a holistic approach. Otherwise, if we miss out on the education or the regulation, you start off on a very dicey approach.
I completely agree. I think if you give people access and you don't give them education, that's pretty dangerous.
Yes.
But if you give people education and you don't give them access, well, that's just pointless.
Exactly.
So
Exactly.
completely the two things go together.
And that is why we cannot take for granted that technology can do it.
Right.
We know, for example, it has been mentioned already that using a mobile phone to access banking, to access all sorts of possibilities and facilities that you need in a business. However, there are indicators, and we need to look at these indicators, because they will show us what needs to be done, the gray areas. We know that, for example, in Africa, women are the majority of entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
They are the majority in agriculture. But we also know that they do not have access even to fertilizers, for example. So it's not simply having the determination and the empowered women, but they need access. So education can give that access.
I agree. I mean, one of the things that we've done is we've worked with the Gates Foundation to open a lab in Kenya. And it's basically Africans designing and building products for Africa. And the first product they produced in that lab was for farmers, men and women, but many of the farmers are women. And it gave them the ability to sell their crops online and get market prices for them instead of having to go through middlemen. And this is really empowering. And the technology is designed so you don't need a smartphone. You know, you can do it on a very basic piece of technology. And but you can't do it unless you have some sort of incentive for the women to use it. So we came across someone in Tanzania who was willing to pay the women farmers slightly more for their sunflower oil if they adopted the technology. And it's this kind of social entrepreneurship that's going to change the world.
And what I would like to add, maybe MasterCard, such a huge global company, and other companies, maybe one could collaborate with the African Union. The African Union, at this very point in time, they are building up a free trade area. So they are very much into what is happening, gaining strength by bringing the countries of Africa together.
I'm
so
thinking
that
bigger
it will
than
have,
this. I'm thinking beyond just Africa. So if we have technology and there are people who are willing to pay more for products that are used by women who are using these technological platforms, how do we use it for example, how can we use the blockchain to push for equal pay around the world? Sometimes I get a little frustrated with the Me Too movement, right? Yes, Me Too. What about equal pay? We've been arguing, I mean, Vigdis, I don't know if she's still here. She started this conversation a very long time ago, and we're still not there. How is that still not happening, right? We have an opportunity, I think, here with financial technology reminding us of the importance of having men and women financially empowered and what that means, right? How when women have access to a job and to their own bank account, not money that they're stashing under a mattress, but money that is in their account, that maybe they're accessing with their fingerprint, that someone can't take from them, and that is secure because there's technology, and that they know how to invest properly because they've been educated. How can all of this financial technology be a reminder for us of, well, can we use, you know, a peer-to-peer transparent ledger to show what salaries are around the world so that we can ensure there's equal pay? How can we use this for the developing world and the developed? I want to see if we can incorporate both, because I think there's an opportunity in both worlds.
I think one key angle here, both for gender-related topics such as equal pay or the career potential for women, and as well as technology disruption, I think the importance of policies. I think there is an illusion of the traditional Western capitalism to think market is going to take care of everything.
No.
That if you just let technology grow, they will solve most of the problem.
We'll all just be confused.
Or if you just focus on merits only, then somehow women are going to rise to the top. Right? I think that's the illusion. I think the government, NGOs, social entrepreneurs have a very important role to play. I think governments particularly, they have to regulate technology. They have to provide that basis for technology to thrive and to benefit society. And similarly in the gender topic, right? You have to, as the government, I think it's government obligations, like where we are here, to have the right policy in place and to not fall into the victim, to think somehow the market is going to solve itself.
You know, I think it's not, you know, I think along with governments, I think the big global corporations of the world have a responsibility to look at what are they paying their men and women around the world, and to make sure, I mean, we operate in over 210 countries. Let's make sure that we are giving equal pay for equal work.
I'm so glad you said that.
No question about it in our minds. We must do that.
That is
And the other thing that we must do is we must change the cultural values around the world about women's careers and men's careers. One of the things that we've done in our company is say we're going to give 4 months maternity leave and 2 months paternity leave everywhere in the world, regardless of what the laws are. Obviously, if the laws are better than that, you get whatever the legal minimum is. But in many parts of the world, that's way beyond the legal minimum. What's important about this is the paternity leave. Now, the paternity leave says when guys have kids, they should stay home and actually enjoy that experience and, you know, be there as the father to their kids. And what we've seen is so many companies rolling out these programs, but you know what? Their cultures don't allow the men to take the time off. The rules say that, but the men don't do it. In our company, we rolled it out a couple of years ago. We're monitoring it, and 70% of the allowance now is taken around the world. I'd love it to be 100%, but that's pretty high. That is telling you it's really acceptable in our company for guys to stay at home when they become new parents. If that happens, then as you're interviewing women for jobs, as you're looking for women to move up to more senior levels in the company, you're not looking at them differently to the men. You know, you're both sharing what's happening at home and what's happening at work. And that's the thing that's going to change the world. That's what I really believe.
I'm really pleased that this point has been taken up. We're speaking of practically two different issues. We're speaking of equal pay, which many of the countries from the region I come from have the legislation in place, and that is very clear. And really, I don't think that there are any defaults on that. However, then, you have also mentioned the gender pay gap, which this is very, very important, because it's not a question of a woman seeing what a man is taking for a salary. It's the issue of your working life progression. If you have a break in your career because you want to raise your children, like having maternity leave, that would, yes, impact the gender pay gap in that sense. Iceland is the very first country, I believe, that have legislated with regards to gender pay gap. And I know of this because Hannah, I don't know where Hannah is. We invited Hannah over to Malta earlier this year because we are very concerned on the issue of gender pay gap. Within the European Union, there's a 16% difference, which is huge. Even though most of us have, or rather all of us, have an equal pay legislation in place. So we need to delve deeper to see how we need to address, but also we can look at Iceland itself to see what they have done, as we are doing in Malta, so as to ensure that if it's either legislation, but that on its own is not enough, as you have been saying, we need also the change in culture. And a change in culture, if we leave it to nature, it will take hundreds of years, and by that time, we're all forgotten and done with. And we hope that but we need to help that change in culture by, as MasterCard, as you have been saying, putting in the right, taking up the right initiatives, introducing the right measures to encourage and to empower men. Because we need to empower men, that they are also fathers. And you have to be a full-time father if you want to truly be a good parent, and you would be doing your responsibility to your child. So such measures do help the change in mentality, the change in culture. The addressing of the patriarchal attitudes that we still have, unfortunately, even in the most advanced countries on legislation. So the issue of equal pay and gender pay gap really are two different issues and need tackling in different ways.
And a key to approaching them, I would argue, and I'm sure I mean, this is something that would come up if we had a longer time to discuss, but more women in positions of power, right? I was very surprised yesterday at a leaders' lunch to discover that there are only 11% female CEOs in Iceland. Iceland has the superlative of being, ranked top in gender parity for 9 years going, and there's not a single female CEO on an Icelandic listed company. Which, if this is the best we have in the world, imagine everybody else if this is where Iceland is. And maybe if that pay gap were smaller, there would be more incentive for women to get to the top, in addition to many other things, right? But it's all part of it.
We need more women at all levels of responsibility.
We do.
First and foremost, at the policy making and decision taking of our countries. in parliament, in our highest institutions. We need more women to be visible. We need to have parity as soon as possible, because if we are there in numbers, together with men, then there is a holistic approach of thinking, of developing those policies, of taking those decisions. Then obviously, I am convinced that we will influence business, we will influence communities, we can influence our young children.
Yeah.
And I'm saying children, not simply girls, because we need girls and boys to be empowered together, because we cannot continue this discourse every time. We need to really go
it's exhausting.
from...
We
Yes,
know
it's
that investing in women always has excellent returns, so we just need to do it more.
Yes.
Now, I'm aware that we've got 2.5 minutes left, so I just want to give you all a snappy question to answer quickly before we go. Joan Rivers was the first female host of a late-night show in the US, and she once said, "They say money is not the key to happiness, but surely if you have enough of it, you can make a key." So I'd like to ask the three of you, before we close, if you could make a door and a key, what would it be for the future of financial inclusion? What does that key look like? What kind of door does it open? Shall we start with Kevin? Or do you want a moment to think?
I need a moment to think.
You need a moment to think. All right, make it a very elaborate key. It could be a smart key. It could be your finger. Whatever. Be creative. What does that key look like? What is the key to the future of financial inclusion look like?
I think that the key is a digital key, and the key opens the door to an identity for women who haven't had an identity around the world. You know that you can be born in places that you don't have a passport, driver's license. You're somebody's mother, sister, daughter. You're not somebody in your own right. That key would be a biometric key that would give you a digital identity, and that digital identity would not just link you to the financial world, it would link you to the world of medicine. You know, your biometrics, your genetic profile would give you access to the kind of medicines you need. It would give you access to education and education for your families. It would be an inclusive key. And that key would generate the entrepreneurs of the future and the women who would be able to grow up, go into the big companies, stand up for themselves, climb up the corporate ladder, get into the C-suite, become the chairman of companies, rule the world.
All right. Her Excellency, can you come up with a key that's just as good?
Well, I definitely agree with having an inclusive key. Okay. So if it has to be a door today, if I had to build a door today with a key, I don't think I would go immediately for the digital key, because that would not be an inclusive key. Not everybody, not every woman has access to digital know-how. So I would go for the conventional key, but immediately this door would open up into a classroom to empower all our women to have the digital key immediately. And that door would lead to this anniversary that we, in a few days' time, will be commemorating. The 70 years anniversary since the Declaration for Universal Human Rights have been approved, which at the heart of our universal human rights is equality and equity. So we need that key to lead us to the full implementation of what our foremothers and forefathers have done for us 70 years ago, to really put them into effective use for all of us, whoever we are, from wherever we are, we can enjoy our human rights.
This is an excellent key as well. We've given you the very hard task of following up on those keys.
Of course, yeah, it's very difficult to follow up a digital key and the traditional key. So my key would be different. My key would be a mental key. Okay. Because I think most of the problems that exist today are actually, those problems exist in our mind. I think it's about whether you dare to think, whether you are optimistic to know that there are definitive solutions rather than take a defeatist road to say, oh, you know, it's gender difference, the pay is different, there's nothing we could do. I think people should dare to think. Technology is there. I think money is there, frankly, in this world compared to 50 years ago. This is a world that is materially quite rich. I think distribution may be a problem. If people dare to think in their mindset, it's a can-do attitude. I told my daughter when she was very young, when she had some difficulties, at some point I told her, I said, Erica, every problem has 5 solutions. You just need to look harder. And you just have to believe that. So to me, it's a key in our mind that we have to. Yeah.
So we've got a mental key, a physical key, and a virtual key. We hope you enjoyed that and that this will unlock promising futures for many women and men in the world. Thank you very much for joining us.